Mercury promised the Verado V12 would change boating forever, a $1.5 billion gamble on power, luxury, and seamless automation. But beneath the glossy launch, internal warnings about moisture, emissions credits, and dealer dependency were ignored. The Mercury Verado V12 scandal just got exposed because what looked like the future is now stranding owners, locking them out of repairs, and sparking an industry-wide reckoning. The story you think you know barely scratches the surface. What did Mercury insiders risk, and what comes next for everyone on the water? In 2016, Mercury Marine set out to break every rule in the outboard playbook. The goal? Deliver a 600-horsepower engine with the elegance and reliability of a luxury car, all before the competition could even catch its breath. 5 years and $1.5 billion later, the Verado V12 rolled onto the docks, a machine that promised to redefine what was possible on the water. The pressure was relentless. Engineers worked under a development window that left little room for error or delay. Each milestone meant another round of stress tests, another late-night scramble to meet performance targets. The company's ambition was clear: outpace Yamaha, Suzuki, and Honda, whose biggest outboards topped out at 425 and 350 horsepower. Mercury's V12 would not just lead, it would leave the rest of the industry playing catch-up. But speed came at a price. Deadlines dictated choices, and budget constraints forced compromises. The V12's automatic 2-speed transmission, steerable lower unit, and emissions system were all engineered in parallel, racing the clock. Every subsystem had to work flawlessly, yet the schedule allowed little time for field testing in harsh marine environments. The R&D team faced a constant balancing act: innovate fast, but don't let anything slip through the cracks. The company's marketing machine was already making promises. Oil changes only every 200 hours, no gear case service for 5 years, and a driving experience smoother than anything on the water. As the launch date drew closer, the pressure only intensified. There was no turning back, no way to slow down. The Verado V12 had to be ready, no matter what the engineering log said, no matter how many warnings surfaced in the lab. In the world of high-stakes marine innovation, speed and spectacle often take precedence over caution. And with every passing month, the cost of missing the deadline grew heavier, not just in dollars, but in the risks that would soon become impossible to ignore. Inside Mercury's engineering lab, the V12 steering system faced a relentless barrage of salt spray, rapid temperature swings, and vibration cycles. Patterns began to surface. Moisture crept past the sensor seals, pooling inside the gear case housing. After repeated thermal cycling, condensation formed on critical connectors, sometimes shorting out the steering position sensor before the engine ever left the bench. These weren't isolated findings. Engineers documented the failures, noting how even minor traces of water could trigger faults that left the system vulnerable. The warnings grew more specific. Moisture intrusion was not just possible, but probable in real-world marine conditions. As the launch deadline loomed, these internal memos circulated among project leads. The pressure to deliver the V12 on schedule meant some risks could only be managed after release. Not long after the first engine shipped, owners began reporting sudden steering failures. The cause traced back to the same moisture issues flagged in the lab. Mercury responded with a recall, offering sensor replacements and direct factory oversight for affected units. But the underlying vulnerability, water finding its way into delicate electronics, remained a shadow over the new technology. While engineers wrestled with environmental challenges, another strategy was unfolding behind the scenes. Mercury's V12 wasn't just an engineering feat, it was a regulatory play. The engine's advanced catalyst system pushed emissions far below EPA requirements, generating a surplus of regulatory credits. Industry filings confirmed that the V12's emissions profile ran so clean, Mercury banked more EPA credits than any other outboard in its class. These credits became a form of currency, saved for future models, traded with competitors, or used to offset dirtier engines elsewhere in the lineup. The emissions advantage set Mercury apart from Yamaha, Suzuki, and Honda, none of whom had outboards in this class with similar regulatory benefits at launch. Yet, as the V12's technical complexity mounted, so did its dependence on dealer networks. Internal discussions began to reflect concerns about warranty exposure and the growing need for dealer-only servicing. The combination of proprietary software, specialized diagnostic tools, and strict parts controls meant that owners, and even experienced independent mechanics, would soon find themselves locked out of repairs. Early warnings about moisture and service dependency became more than technical notes. They were the seeds of a system designed to keep control tightly in Mercury's hands. The cost of innovation was becoming clear, not just in dollars, but in autonomy, trust, and the freedom that once defined boating. Securing the right to work on a Mercury Verado V12 is not as simple as hanging a shingle or ordering parts. Every technician must pass through Mercury University, a training program that covers not only the engine's unique systems, but also the intricacies of its electronic controls and diagnostics. Certification comes at a price, anywhere from $2,999 to $3,799 per location, with additional fees for each new site a dealer wants to certify. The commitment isn't just financial. Technicians must dedicate hours every week to classes and homework, and the process repeats every year to keep credentials active. Only those who complete the rigorous curriculum earn access to the diagnostic tools required to unlock the V12's software and service menus. But the barrier doesn't end with training. The proprietary diagnostic software, essential for even routine troubleshooting, demands a separate investment. While Mercury doesn't publish official numbers, industry insiders estimate the upfront cost for hardware and software in the low to mid four figures, with annual renewal fees adding hundreds more. These tools are tightly controlled. Only certified dealers can purchase or update them, and contracts strictly forbid sharing access with independent shops. Even experienced marine mechanics find themselves locked out, unable to clear error codes or reset service intervals without the approved software and a valid dealer login. Parts distribution follows the same playbook. Every order for V12 components is tracked and limited to credentialed shops. Warranty claims and recall work require digital job logs submitted through Mercury's proprietary system, closing the loop on independent competition. For owners, the result is a closed ecosystem where a single failed sensor or software glitch can turn into weeks of downtime, unless a certified dealer is nearby and available. The cost of entry, both in dollars and autonomy, is as carefully engineered as the engine itself. Owners who invested in the Mercury Verado V12 quickly discovered that a single warning light or error code could bring everything to a halt. Warranty coverage, once seen as a safety net, came with strict conditions. Every diagnosis and repair had to go through a certified dealer using Mercury's proprietary software. For many, this meant joining a growing queue. Appointment slots at certified shops filled weeks in advance, especially in coastal regions where the V12 had become a status symbol. During peak season, wait times routinely stretched from 2 to 4 weeks, with some owners reporting even longer delays when parts were back-ordered. A technician at a major Florida dealership described the daily reality. "We've got boats lined up in the yard, all waiting on the same sensor or software update. Sometimes it's a week for the part, sometimes it's 3. And if you're not a certified dealer, you can't even order it." The bottleneck wasn't just about labor. Mercury's parts distribution system tracked every V12 component, releasing them only to credentialed shops. Even simple fixes, like a failed steering sensor, required digital job logs and factory authorization before warranty approval. Owners outside boating hotspots faced an even tougher challenge. In some regions, there were only a handful of certified V12 technicians, and the nearest dealer could be hours away. Boats sat idle at marinas, waiting for an open slot or a shipment from the central warehouse. The promise of easy maintenance and long service intervals faded in the face of real-world logistics. For owners, the freedom of the water now depended on a service schedule they couldn't control and a parts pipeline that moved at its own pace. In the summer of 2021, Mercury issued its first major recall for the Verado V12. Owners began receiving urgent notices. A flaw in the steering position sensor could allow moisture to seep inside, triggering sudden power loss and activating Guardian mode. This software safeguard, meant to protect the engine, instead left boats limping back to port with restricted steering and reduced throttle, sometimes miles offshore. Hundreds of engines were affected in the initial wave, with cases reported from the coasts of Florida to marinas in Australia and the UK. Mercury directed owners to bring their vessels to certified dealers for immediate sensor replacement. Factory engineers supervised repairs, underscoring the seriousness of the problem. The recall did not stay contained. Over the next 2 years, reports of steering failures and sensor lockouts continued to surface. Owners who thought their engines were fixed found themselves back in the shop with the same warning lights and the same immobilizing Guardian mode. As the 2023 boating season reached its peak, Mercury announced an expanded recall. This time, every V12 built between 2021 and 2023 was included, an estimated 1,000 to 2,500 engines worldwide. The scope had grown. Condensation and salt spray were found to cause not just sensor faults, but also corrosion inside gear case housings and connectors. Some units required a full lower unit swap, not just a sensor update. Dealers scrambled to manage the influx. Parts shortages stretched wait times from days to weeks, then months. Factory technicians were dispatched to major marinas to handle the volume and complexity of repairs. For many owners, the promise of high-tech reliability had dissolved into frustration and uncertainty. The Verado V12's recall timeline was no longer a footnote. It was a public reckoning, playing out in real time across docks and dealer lots worldwide. Inside a marine diagnostics lab, a failed steering position sensor sits under a microscope. The surface looks intact, but a thin line of corrosion traces the edge where the seal meets the connector. Technicians slice the casing open and find beads of moisture pooled against the circuit board, evidence of water sneaking past the seal during thermal cycling. When the sensor shorts, the engine's electronic brain loses its bearings, triggering a cascade of fault codes. The system responds by locking into Guardian mode, cutting power and freezing steering, just as it was designed to protect itself. But for owners, this safeguard can mean a dead engine miles from shore. Lab analysis doesn't stop at the sensor. Oil samples from failed lower units reveal a cloudy mix, water emulsified with lubricants, a clear sign that seals around the rotating joint have let salt water seep inside. Over time, even a tiny breach is enough to start a chain reaction. Oil leaks out, water gets in, and the gears or wet clutches start to grind themselves down. One independent mechanic describes it simply. It's not a question of if the seal will fail, it's when. And once you've got water in the oil, you're on borrowed time. Forensic teams use salt fog chambers to replicate the harshest marine conditions, cycling temperature and humidity, to force condensation into every weak point. Failed sensors and seals from the field are compared against new parts, mapping out exactly where materials break down. Metallurgists look for signs of fatigue or chemical attack, while electronics specialists trace the path of every shorted wire. The pattern is consistent. Moisture finds its way in, electronics fail, oil leaks begin, and the system's self-protection routines leave the owner stranded. These lab findings explain why recalls were not just about swapping a sensor. They were an attempt to patch a chain of vulnerabilities that starts with a single drop of water and ends with a disabled engine. The technical autopsy reveals a simple truth. In the battle between innovation and the marine environment, every shortcut and overlooked seal becomes a future repair ticket. A summer morning off the coast of Florida, and a 42-foot center console sits dead in the water. The owner, a charter captain who invested nearly $200,000 in a pair of Mercury Verado V12s, radios for help. 30 miles from shore, the engines have slipped into guardian mode. Steering locked, throttle cut, no way to limp home. By the time a tow arrives, the day's bookings are lost. The captain's frustration boils over as he scans the error codes on the digital dash, powerless to fix the problem himself. Service won't come cheap. The nearest certified dealer is booked solid for 3 weeks, and replacement parts are on back order. When the final invoice lands, the repair bill tops $20,000, more than the cost of a used outboard, all for a sensor fault and water-damaged gear case. Warranty coverage is denied on a technicality. The last required software update wasn't installed by an authorized shop. The captain's boat sits idle for most of the season, his business bleeding revenue with every passing day. He's not alone. Owner forums fill with similar stories: fishing trips canceled, family weekends ruined, boats hauled out and left waiting for a part that may not arrive. The pride and excitement of owning the marine world's most advanced engine give way to a sense of betrayal. For many, the dream has become a burden, measured in lost time, mounting bills, and a helplessness that no amount of horsepower can overcome. Across the marine industry, the Verado V12's arrival forced a reckoning, not just in horsepower, but in how outboards are built, sold, and serviced. Industry analysts point out that Mercury's flagship commands a 15 to 25% cost premium over Yamaha's 425 horsepower XTO offshore or Suzuki and Honda's 350 horsepower models. The price gap isn't just about raw power. It reflects a new reality. High-end outboards now come bundled with proprietary electronics, software locks, and mandatory dealer servicing. 5-year ownership costs for a twin V12 setup routinely exceed $160,000, with fuel and maintenance outpacing rivals by thousands of dollars per season. Competitors like Yamaha and Suzuki have so far resisted the full lockout model, allowing more independent shops to handle routine repairs. Their engines can be serviced with widely available diagnostic tools, and parts are easier to source. Yet even these brands are trending toward tighter controls, hinting at an industry-wide shift. The right-to-repair movement has taken notice. Advocacy groups argue that Mercury's closed ecosystem sets a precedent that could reshape the entire market. They point to a future where boaters must pay for access, not just for engines. Legislative hearings in several states have cited the Verado V12 as a case study in repair restriction, fueling calls for policy change. The debate now extends beyond one engine or one company, raising questions about who truly owns the technology beneath the cowling, and what freedom on the water will cost in the years ahead. In August 2023, Mercury Marine expanded its recall to cover steering and sensor failures on the Verado V12, just 2 years after its $1.5 billion launch. Internal memos from 2018 show engineers warned of moisture intrusion and dealer dependency, yet the product reached the market with those vulnerabilities intact. Owners faced service wait times of 2 to 4 weeks, with repair bills topping $20,000, while independent mechanics were locked out by software and parts restrictions. Compared to Yamaha and Suzuki's flagship models, the V12 costs 15 to 25% more to own over 5 years. Yet detailed costs for proprietary diagnostics and the full number of affected units remain undisclosed. As the right to repair debate intensifies, the Verado V12 stands as a clear example. When innovation outpaces accountability, it's consumers who shoulder the risk. The promise of the world's most advanced outboard became a cautionary tale, backed by documents, invoices, and the voices left stranded on the water.